went to bed last night and my sermon was done. That's a big deal. On a Saturday night, Pastor Pete's sermon is done. That rarely happens. It doesn't mean that on most Sundays that I haven't already written a lot of my sermon, but usually on Sunday morning I get up and I tweak it, I get it finished here, I add some more pictures here, but my sermon was actually done. And it was actually pretty good. I felt pretty good about it. I was going to talk all about sheep. I was going to talk all about shepherds. I was even going to show you a video about a time that I have been a shepherd. Not only did I get to meet those shepherds in Turkey, I've actually been a shepherd before. When I was a camp director at church camp, we used to do a Christmas in July, every single last day of the week in July. And so we would make a live nativity scene. And it was my job to go get a couple of sheep and a couple of goats. So I have been a shepherd before. I have not been a good shepherd, but I have been a shepherd. And I was going to show you a video of that. I was going to give you all kinds of opportunities to laugh. And in the midst of laughter, there would also be some opportunities to learn. But then I woke up this morning, and I checked my email, and I caught up on the news. And as I was sipping my coffee, I found out that the devastating news about the earthquake in Nepal, when I went to bed, it had claimed the lives of about 800 people. And now I was informed after my first sermon today that there is over 2,000 people that we know have lost their lives in this devastating earthquake. And so immediately I went, I can wear those sheep ears for my children's sermon. I don't think I can wear them for my regular sermon. And so I quickly realized that my silly sermon about sheep and shepherds simply wasn't going to cut it this morning. Because every time that there's an earthquake like there was in Nepal, every time that there's a tragedy like that, aren't we all reminded of the last time that there was a tragedy like that, right? We immediately think of Haiti and the terrible earthquake that happened there. We think of tsunamis, we think of floods, we think of hurricanes, we think of tornadoes. There was tornadoes not long ago. We think of car accidents, we think of cancer, we think of terrorist attacks. And we're not in the mood to wear sheep ears. We're not in the mood to laugh. And so I'm thankful for Jesus, the Good Shepherd, this morning, who led me down a different path. I've got my sermon all set for a year from now. Because every single year, it's on the fourth Sunday of Easter, it's Good Shepherd Sunday. So I'm just going to file this one away. You'll be able to watch the video a year from now. I'll send you out an email. Make sure you come. Remember my sermon that I wrote before? Now I'm going to preach it. But I'm preaching a different one today. Because Jesus, the Good Shepherd, guided me down a different path. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, guided me down the valley of the shadow of death. And as we walk together through that valley, may we know that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is with us. As we walk together through the valley of the shadow of death today, may we know that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is with the people of Nepal and with all people who suffer. As I reread our Bible passages, because after I realized that my sermon wasn't going to cut it, then it was time to pray again really hard and to look at the Bible readings again really hard. And I said, what do I notice about these Bible readings? What do they say? Well, first of all, Psalm 23 was one of our readings for today. We sang it. And it's that psalm that we turn to in difficult times because it's a reminder that God is with us in those difficult times. And so that was the easy thing. I noticed Psalm 23. I could just preach about that. That would work well. But then I noticed all of our Bible readings talk about the same thing. Not just sheep, not just shepherds. They all talk about laying down. Lying down. I'm going to show you all the multiple times that phrase shows up. In our gospel lesson, Jesus says, the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep in verse 11. He also says in verse 15, the same thing, right? And I lay down my life for the sheep. And then he says, for this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. He keeps on talking about it. I lay it down on my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. Today's supposed to be like Good Shepherd Sunday, but we should just call it like lay down on the chair Sunday, right? that we should talk about laying down. What does it mean that Jesus lays down his life for us? And then the beautiful song. The Lord makes me lie down in green pastures. And my favorite one of all is from our first reading today. It says, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for one another. Lay down, lay down, lay down. All of these verses about laying down and lying down brought me back to one of my favorite songs, this beautiful, comforting song sung by Simon and Garfunkel. Remember it? Bridge over troubled waters. I will lay me down is what we hear in that wonderful chorus. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. So I want us to listen to part of that song. It's kind of a long song, so we're not going to listen to all of it, but just a little bit of it. And as we listen to it, I want us to think about the people of Nepal and for people anywhere who are suffering in any way. And as we listen to the song and we hear the chorus, may we also think about Jesus laying down his life for us, making himself a bridge over troubled water, making himself a bridge from death to new life. Isn't it amazing how much that song is like Psalm 23? That is Psalm 23. It has the exact same message. Psalm 23 reminds us that, yes, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall not fear, because you are with me. I think that if Jesus were to walk into House of Prayer Lutheran Church today, and he were to ask kids during a children's sermon, have you ever seen a shepherd before? And they'd say, no, not really, only in a book. And he'd say, have you ever seen a bridge before? Because that's what I'm like. Right? This wonderful metaphor of Jesus being like a shepherd is a metaphor that worked for people in Jesus' day. Jesus spoke to the people in Jesus' day. Jesus is still speaking to us today. And now Jesus would take metaphors of today and say, if you've ever gone across a bridge before, aren't you glad that the bridge is there so that you don't fall in? Right? That's what I'm like. I'm like a bridge over troubled water. I'm a good shepherd. I'm like a good bridge. So just two more stories that we'll talk about being a bridge and how we are called to be bridges for others. When I was a camp director in the same place where I was shepherding sheep, I was also shepherding a great, awesome camp staff. And one camp staff member, his name is Dave. He was our waterfront director. He was super trustworthy. And I sent him out on an overnight to a place called Chicago Falls. This beautiful falls, where when you think of waterfall, they're beautiful and they're also very dangerous. They can be, right, if you don't treat them with care. And so I grew up going to that waterfall all my life, and if you crossed a log that had fallen on top of the waterfall, it was a natural bridge that was built over the troubled water for you. And so you could walk across the log and get to the other side, and that's where the campsite was. But you had to hike for a long ways before you got to that log. And so Dave was in charge of all of these campers, and he got to the waterfall, and he saw that even though that log had been there for decades, the log was no longer there. It had rolled all the way down to the bottom and got stuck at the bottom. It was no longer a bridge over troubled water. And the kids, they'd already hiked for so long, and they said, well, what are we going to do? There's not a campsite here. And he said, I'll be your bridge. I'm so glad that I wasn't there, because I now understand why you all got concerned when I climbed on top of the organ. You thought that was pretty dangerous. I would be the camp director going, you cannot be the bridge and take these kids over the waterfall. No! But he did. And as he told the story to me, he remembers just being so afraid that some kid was going to get washed over. And he remembers feeling the rocks below his feet and how slippery they were, but he remembers how proud they all felt when they got across. And together they all were grabbing each other's hands, and they got really, really wet, but they got across, and nobody got hurt. He was a bridge over troubled water. We can all be those bridges to other people by reaching out to people that we know are in need, whether it's simply by reaching out in prayer for the people of Nepal or anyone who's suffering, we're actually physically reaching out with our hands or with our offering. One other story as well. That's a true story. I know that actually happened. This one, I don't know if it happened, but there's certainly truth within it. It's a story that some of you may know. It's a great story that's been told numerous times in numerous different ways. And it's a story about these two sons that were given a farm by their father. Their father owned the farm for many, many years, and when he died, he left the farm to them. And so one son had this half of the farm, and one son had that half of the farm, and they farmed together, and everything was great. And they would wave at each other, and they would have dinner with each other, until one day something happened that no one knows what it was, but they suddenly no longer spoke to one another. They no longer wanted to see one another. They no longer wanted to work together. You're no brother to me. And for years, they wouldn't communicate with each other. And one day, a person came along, a carpenter, and this carpenter said, I just need a little bit of food, and I need a place to stay tonight. If you have a job around the farm, could I do a job around the farm, and then you just give me a little bit of food and a place to sleep tonight? And so the one brother said, absolutely. I have a job that I've been waiting to get done for a long time. My brother over there, you see that barn over there? That's where my brother lives. I can't stand it. I'm tired of looking at his farm. I'm tired of looking at his tractor. He said, go into town and get a bunch of wood and build me the best, biggest fence that you can ever build, so that I no longer have to ever look at my brother again. So the carpenter said, all right, I can do that. And he went out and got all the measurements, and he went and got all the wood, and as the one farmer was away for the day, he worked and worked and worked and worked, and when the farmer got home, what did he find? It wasn't a fence at all. It was a bridge. He built a bridge to go over the stream that had separated them. He built a bridge to go over all of those differences that had separated them, and he encouraged both brothers to walk and meet in the middle. And they did. Again, I don't know if it's a true story, but there's truth within it. And the beautiful ending to the story is that both brothers said, you did such a great job at building this bridge. You did such a great job of bringing these two brothers, bringing us back together. And he said, would you do some more work around our farm? And he said, I'm sorry, but I can't. I have a whole lot more bridges to build around the world. Yes, that's a challenge for all of us. All of us are called to be bridge builders. Jesus is the good shepherd. Jesus is the good bridge. And if Jesus laid down his life for us, we are called to lay down our lives for others. My favorite verse of the day is verse 18 of our first reading for today. It says, little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and in action. That's what that bridge builder did. That's what my staff person Dave did. That's what Jesus did. Not just with words, but with truth and action. That's what Jesus calls us to do as well. And the people said, amen.